Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Couch Potato Podcast. I'm joined by my good friend and Saturday Night Live expert Steven on today's show as we give to you our top 5 greatest Saturday Night Live performers of all time. We break down why we came up with our list, we share our favorite skits, our favorite host, and more. Steven's also kind enough to share his experience getting to see the show live. And also gives you guys and gals a little tip on how to go see the show live if you're ever in the New York area. So, the top 5 Saturday Night Live cast members is right now on the Couch Potato Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Couch Potato Podcast. I am Russ, and on today's show, I'm joined by a very special guest, a gentleman who has not been on the show for quite a while. Welcome Steven back to the show. Steven, how's it going, man?
Hey, Bruce. Thanks for having me. Good to be back. I always like being referred to as a gentleman because, I don't feel like I am. So when I get called one, it feels good.
I do not associate with anyone or any male person that does not have the title gentleman. Like I surround myself with good, dignified, classy people. Which is actually anybody that knows me knows that's like not the case at all. I just hang out with a bunch of degenerates, but feels good to be called a gentleman from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I asked you on the show today. About 3 weeks ago, I started listening to a podcast called A Fly on the Wall. It's a podcast hosted by Dana Carvey and David Spade. They reminisce about their times on Saturday Night Live, and a lot of times the guest is a person that has been associated with the show, whether it be former cast member, a writer, a guest host. And I just found like listening to these stories kind of made me start reminiscing about like when I used to watch the show quite a bit. So I kind of wanted to do an episode about Saturday Night Live. And when I was rattling my brain trying to figure out who would be the perfect guest to have on, you were the first person that came to mind. You were the Saturday Night Live expert in my group of friends. So I thought you'd be perfect for this episode tonight.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I love that you asked me. It's why I think Saturday Night Live, I thought a lot about this when you called me to prepare for this. Because I feel like out of my group of friends, you're definitely someone who we were both into that. So we could recite skits, things like that. But it kind of made me think back. It's like, wow, how did I start watching that? And I just remember it's, my father watching it with Dad, TA, watching those older episodes with him. And at some point, I remember it just became funny to me. I remember it started from like, I'm just watching him watching. I don't understand anything. And then at some point, in the early 90s, I'm like, oh, it's fun. It's fun. It's making me laugh now. And then ever since then, I've just been fascinated with the show. And then kind of just the spirit of it, just the whole it's an American institution, and it's something I've loved it so much. I've gone on 2 tours of the studio that you can when you visit Rockefeller, you can do a tour, and I've done that a couple times, and yeah, I love it. So love that you invited me to talk about it.
Nice. You said you started watching it with your dad. What was the time frame around that?
So that would have been mid 80s. And so at that time, I don't think it was doing very well. I think around that time, I don't even know if Lorne Michaels was producing it. I remember the opening sequence was like this weird roller coaster. And I'm trying to think who cast members. I want to say, oh my gosh, I can't even think of.
Well, the mid 80s had that time where I think, who was it? Dick Ebersol, who was the head of NBC Sports, was running the show for a little while, and he decided that they wanted to treat it almost like a sports franchise where they started bringing in like all these like top tier comedians. Because I think that's Billy Crystal was on there in the mid 80s. Christopher Guest was on there, Harry Shearer.
I think that does mark a time where it was they went from kind of started with unknown stand-up comedians and comedic actors, and then you had like really well established at that point.
Yeah, because I think that's like mid 80s is like 84 is like right after Eddie Murphy had left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it
Yep.
seemed like, because I was introduced to it, Entertainment Television, when it used to be a halfway decent station, they used to run 30-minute episodes of the old Saturday Night Live stuff.
Mhm.
And that's how I got introduced to it. And I would sit and watch it because it was only like a half an hour long. And some of those after like the original, like, Aykroyd, Chase, Gilda, all those folks came and gone. And it seemed like it was kind of rough until probably 90.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I had gotten a TV in my bedroom, and I live with my grandfather, and they were too cheap to get me cable TV in my room. So I had to rely on rabbit ears, and the only station I could pick up was the local NBC affiliate. So I basically got kind of stuck watching Saturday Night Live, and I kind of fell in love with it because this was probably sixth, seventh, eighth grade for me when I started watching it, which is probably around the same time you got into it.
Yeah, I would say so. It was probably around the time again where the skits made like I it made sense enough to where I thought it was funny, And then the other thing that I think was that I just brings great memories of is just seeing these people do that, and then me as a kid going, "Oh wow, that's so cool! They're building this world
Mm-hmm.
around this sketch, this idea of a sketch. I never even thought of it, and then you see this, and for me, I thought it was just uh, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just it blew my mind how cool that was to create these little skits, these little miniature worlds
Mm-hmm.
for a funny few minutes.
I think
You
when
know,
you're in that frame of that, when you're growing up, late middle school into your high school years, that seems to be like, I've noticed that everyone I've talked to about this topic seems to be their favorite time of Saturday Night Live was that era when they were in high school. And it seems like when you watch it, even if you watch it for a little bit, it kind of formulates your sense of humor if you watch the
oh yeah,
show.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
that's kind of what I've always taken from it. And that's probably like the thing that I've gained most is like my sense of humor, I think, is from watching Saturday Night Live over the years because you always have that one performer that you just immediately connect with and
Mhm.
you can't miss them. Like I know everybody has their own favorite weekend update anchor. Because I know, like, I just whenever I do a show, I always text people like, "Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?" Just kind of get feedback and stuff. And I know, like for me, my favorite anchor was Norm Macdonald, but then buddy of mine was a Dennis Miller guy. Some people like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. So
Yeah, I loved. My dad always said that. I'm sorry. Who was the one? Norm Macdonald. He always said he's the funniest man alive because anything he says is hilarious,
mm,
and I always thought that I agreed with that in terms of that his time doing the weekend update because just anything he delivered it just sounded so funny. I would say my favorite, and probably just because around the time it was just the time in my life it really molded like the kind of like you said the comedy I liked. I think Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey was just
mm.
I just have a lot of great memories. I don't think that they were the funniest, but it's probably my favorite just because of the time in my life when I was watching them. I was always really excited to see a weekend update for them. And also I thought it was cool to have two people. I don't know that they had done that before, but I remember when I saw that for the first time, I almost felt like, oh, I wish they've always done it like this because it kind of gives breaks in between the jokes.
Well, I know they originally, I believe Chevy was the first weekend update anchor, and then it went to Aykroyd and Jane Curtin were doing it together.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
they went two, and then I think they had one for quite a long time because I know they had Miller, Nealon, McDonald. Oh, jeez, I think I stopped watching it
Colin Quinn,
after.
I think, was after, or I can't, yeah, I think Colin Quinn went after Norm
Yeah,
MacDonald.
Colin Quinn. Yeah, I remember him. I think it was after Quinn started is when I kind of stopped watching it for a while.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
same here for us. I think that there's a kind of a gap in that for me. Yeah.
well, I noticed that anytime like stuff that you grew up with as a kid, if it's like a long running like franchise, like, and it could be anything. It could be like on the show we do a lot of professional wrestling on here, and I know like Saturday Night Live's kind of like wrestling to an extent. It's like you have like eras or like spots in time where you are into it, and it's like the epicenter of your entertainment, and then like you kind of start like, okay, this is established. I know this is good, or I like this, but let me branch out and see what else is out there. And I always have this to come back to. And I think that's kind of how Saturday Night Live was. It's like, okay, I know I'll enjoy this, but let me see what else is out there. I'll come back later. Plus, 17, 18, 19 years old, you're usually not staying home at 11:30 on Saturday night. So I think that's kind of where I lost. It was like, okay, I'm out doing stuff I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, for me, I think it wasn't until it became easy to find the content online that, but after, between that time, like you said, that's where that gap was. But yeah, once it became easy for me to find these episodes online, that's when I kind of picked up, I would say, mid 2000s or like 2010s and on. I've kind of been it's allowed me to pretty much always consistently watch the show. Yeah, same for me. I'm not home when it's on, and I forget to record it. So
yeah, there's usually I can find there's a website called Deadline Hollywood, and being a movie nerd, I'm always fascinated with the box office returns for the movies that weekend. And they usually will post a final number, like the final estimate on Sunday mornings, but you can always catch on Deadline. They pick like the best clips from Saturday Night Live the day before. And that's how I usually end up watching the show now. It's just like through those clips, like, oh, okay, they said, like, I know yesterday's episode, because we're recording on a Sunday night. So last episode, the cold open was Trump at the East Palestine, Ohio, that chemical spill that they had. It was like, I don't know all the performers, so that's how often I watch it. But the guy that does Trump now was on there, and I was like, man, he's actually really good. Like, he's got Trump's like that rough delivery that he has sometimes, and he even does that shifting on the podium and stuff. Like, man, this guy's actually really good. But the cold open was really good. So that's how I digest the show now. So you actually got a chance to go see that in person once before, right?
I did. This is one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me in my life. Again, I've loved Saturday Night Live for a really long time, and I've always wanted to get tickets. And so the way you have to get tickets, it's like a lottery. And so every I can't remember the time frame. I usually get a reminder email, or I see something on Facebook, but you have a time frame where you can email NBC and let them know you want tickets. And usually there's something fun, like they want you to explain why you want tickets. So I would say for every year, for gosh, as long as I can remember having an email and knowing that's how they did it, I would submit my name. And I remember in 2017, I'm sitting at work. And I get an email from, I still have the email. I couldn't find it for this. It's buried way down. I can't even remember which address it's in, but I know I still have it. It's from NBC. And it's so funny. I opened it up and it said, "Congratulations, you have been selected for Saturday Night Live tickets. Please call this number for details." And what's so funny, it looked so unofficial. Like, it looked, at first I thought it was spam. I was like, there's no way this is real, and so I remember I even did some research on that phone number, and it seemed legit. So I called the phone number and I told him who I was, and she verified my information. She says, "Yeah, you got selected, and you get 2 tickets." And I got really lucky, because I think when you don't get to choose, you don't choose your date, and you don't choose whether you get the dress rehearsal or you get the live show. But we were selected for the live show, and it was actually the 2017 Christmas episode. And that was hosted by Jimmy Fallon with Justin Timberlake as the musical guest.
Oh, wow. You got a good one.
I know we got so lucky. I think if we got the one before that, it would have been John Goodman, which I would have been happy to see too. But I was really happy that we got selected for this one. So yeah, my wife and I, we only had a couple weeks. You don't have a lot of time, and if you don't go, they'll just select somebody else. So I confirmed that we went, and we booked a hotel, and yeah, it was really cool. Do you want me to kind of talk through the experience?
Yeah, go ahead, man. Because that was actually the next question I had was how is it watching it live versus watching on TV? Now, before we go into that, now you said that, so you actually, they'll give you tickets for the dress rehearsal, so you actually, there's a chance you won't get to see the show as it's happening, but you get to watch them practice, basically?
Yeah, that's it. So you might get a chance to see dress rehearsal. Now,
is that the same day, or is that like the day before?
Yeah, it's before the live show.
Okay.
So it's before the live show. The things I've heard about that is that it's a little more interactive with the audience because, though it's a little more fun, and you actually get to see sketches that might not be on air, so it's longer. So yeah, so I was really happy. I mean, that would have been a cool experience. I'd have been happy with that, but I thought it was really cool.
Now, I did hear, who was it? John Hamm was on that Fly on a Wall show. I forget the date, but I was listening to that episode, and the infamous skit that he does with Bill Hader, where John Hamm is James Mason and Bill Hader's Vincent Price.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. John Hamm was supposed to be another actor. Now that I'm talking about it, it completely lost my train of thought. But they did this particular actor in dress rehearsal, and Lorne Michaels didn't like it. So basically, John Hamm had to go into the dressing room to like regroup, and Bill Hader comes in and asks him if he has like another character in mind, and then he does James Mason from, I think it's Heaven Can Wait, an old Warren Beatty movie from the late 70s. And they did this a couple hours before they went live. And that skit is absolutely hysterical if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. That's funny. That's amazing. They on the fly you had to change it. Mm-hmm. That's that takes a lot of. I'd be really nervous about that, but they're professionals. Mm-hmm. And that's really cool.
So how is it watching it live versus watching an episode on television?
It was just surreal for me. It's one of the bad things about being live is the studio is really small, so the way it's broke up, it's surprisingly small, and depending on where you sit, you might only, there are skits you might not even see at all, and that was the case for where we were. What was really cool is we were right above the cold open stage, so we got to see really great view of the cold open, but then as they move around the stage for the different skits, you start to lose visibility. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the bad things, but the experience for me was cool enough. Like it sucks you don't see it, but they have televisions everywhere, so you can still kind of see everything. But it's just surreal to kind of see it live. And one of the things that really stood out to me is how like intimate, I guess it feels, because it's such a small space, mm-hmm. right? And you're seeing these people, you're seeing the actors, and then you're seeing everyone supporting it all around, and then you see the audience, and it just seems like you're just in this. It just, because I think it's so enclosed, it felt really intimate, and it felt. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it just felt really cool. Like it almost felt like it was just a community thing, like maybe as a community theater kind of thing, right? It didn't seem like a big production.
The experience, I read about the experience of it, and somebody had summed it up as you're watching the Rolling Stones at like your local watering hole. It's like you're watching them at like your local, like the Rolling Stones, the biggest band in the world, at your local dive bar, kind of.
That's a really great way to put it. Yeah. Um, what's also was cool again, seeing the TV and then knowing that's what you'd be seeing live at home. Like
Mm,
I kind of caught myself like watching that and then looking. It's like, wow, I get to see it from this perspective.
yeah.
That was really cool. But yeah, it was amazing. My wife said you smiled the whole time. Like just had just a big smile, and I felt like I remember my mouth being really tired from that, and then every time they ask you to applause, I would overdo it because I'm like so excited.
Yeah. So amped
Uh,
for it.
yeah, and then the other really cool thing is seeing where we were. We were really close to the edge, and so as cast members would come up and get ready, they would always they I make eye contact with so many. I don't know if they saw me directly. They're looking up
Uh,
at everyone, and they're so cool because they just wave to you and they'll yell at you and stuff. It's a great experience. Oh, a cool thing is before the show starts, they give you a warm up act, and for us, it was Keenan. Uh, yeah, Keenan. He sung. And it was really cool. He's a fantastic singer, and
mhm.
he comes out and he sings a song just to get the crowd pumped up. And they had a couple of the I think it was Cecily Strong and oh gosh, she just left kind of recently. She was so funny. I can't think of her name now, but it was another cast member, and they did a song, and that was just a cool thing that you wouldn't see on the live show at all, but
Yeah.
the audience you get to see it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you text me that. I would love to go see that just to say that I went and seen it. I wouldn't give a shit who was the host.
Yeah, that's how we felt. I wouldn't even care. And the one cool thing that happened is my wife and we were on national television for about 3 seconds when they did one of the commercial bumper breaks.
Oh,
I don't know if they still do it, but during that time they would, while they were still doing commercial, they would do like a quick pan of the audience
hmm.
or something like that. And we were there when I'm like waving like an idiot because I'm so excited. And then it was so funny. A couple of my coworkers texted me the
Really?
picture on me. Yeah.
Well, you can stream those on Peacock, or as we call them
Yeah.
on our show, the Cock. Once we
Yeah.
get done with this, I'm gonna look up and see if I could see you on there because I've never watched like a full episode to see if they do those or not. But I have to now.
Yeah, so I remember finding it and showing Jessica online. So I remember seeing it
Yeah,
on there. So
I'll have to look for it
I
now.
think it's after the first musical thing,
Hmm.
but yeah, you'll find it. I'm wearing a bright turquoise sweater. Like I want to wear the brightest sweater so that if that happened, I can point
Oh
myself
yeah,
out.
it's like
And
I know that guy. I know that guy.
yeah,
That's
oh yeah.
awesome, man. Yeah, I always thought it was one of those things where you were like invited, like basically it was like friends or like important people got to go see that show. I just didn't know that like any old person can like have a chance to go.
Well, Russ, I appreciate that because that means you must have thought I must have been important because
Well, you are
that was a
important. You're my friend, so. And with it being February and this is Valentine's Day, that's as sentimental as I'm going to get for the rest of the month.
The other way I've heard that you can get tickets is standby tickets, and it's been a while since I looked, but I think the process for that is it's like you have to get up early. You get up early, you wait in line, you get a voucher, and that voucher lets you come in and then stand in line for a standby ticket.
Okay,
And
so it's kind of like Black Friday almost. Like you want the cheap TV that's like $200. That's not worth $200. And
yeah,
stand in line for it, and then you may get it, you may not.
and so a lot of times, like I was asking the guy that was kind of walking us through the building, how that worked standby, and he said like so for a show like where we were at, there's everyone who gets tickets, they're most likely coming,
Mm,
so probably nobody in standby is getting in, or very few people in standby is getting in, but depending on who the host is, they can usually tell if they're going to have to go get standby, pull people in, to
yeah,
fill the seat. But yeah, so yeah, another way to get tickets if you don't get selected.
man, that's such a cool story, man. Like I remember you told me you got those tickets, and I was fucking blown. Like, holy shit, he's fucking going.
Yeah,
I think I was as happy about you going as you were that you were going.
To me, it was so surreal, and I wish. The other thing is they were like that you couldn't take pictures, which completely makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm mad at myself now because I go online and no one follows that rule. Like so many people did, but I was so afraid at the time that I didn't take any pictures.
Yeah, you weren't gonna.
The other thing is, it doesn't matter. I would have got some shitty pictures that I can just go online and get. I wish. To me, I think I almost feel like I was just in a daze the whole time.
Yeah.
And I wish I I always feel like I wish I can go experience it again because you feel like, oh, I wouldn't be so excited, and then maybe I would focus more on stuff. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always next time.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe.
Every year, one day, I'm sure one year, and I've seen online it's not like impossible to get selected for tickets.
Yeah.
Twice, so it's happened to some people. So
Yeah. Well, you can just change like the spelling of your name. You could be Stefan.
Yeah.
And then like maybe put like a K instead of a T in your name, and like maybe a different email address.
What I should do is I should write a killer sketch and then submit that sketch with my submission. Say, here, so anyone can use this. Just give me tickets. I feel like a good sketch is worth tickets. It's got to be worth an episode, it's got to be worth tickets if I can write a good sketch.
Oh yeah, I think that should be a thing. Like if you can write a sketch, just make it a fucking contest, and we'll even let you pick the show you want to go to.
Ooh, yeah.
Of course, now like they don't let you know. Like they pretty much, I think they announce like the host and the musical guest in like blocks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like from whatever. So like okay, like this month it's Dave Chappelle and the Foo Fighters. It's
Oh, I know what you mean. Like that's right.
Yeah, like Melissa McCarthy and Coldplay, and then you've got like Kid Cudi and whomever, and then like that's it until March, and then they'll announce the March lineup.
Yeah,
I think it's like a COVID thing because I know they were doing that during COVID.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's felt like because they used to not do that. Like you usually didn't know who was hosting
until like the week of. Yeah. Did you watch any of those COVID, like the early COVID? Because I remember I was curious to see how they would pull that off. The first week, I think it was Paul Rudd was the host.
Yeah.
The week that basically the fucking world shut down, and it was really odd to watch that. And I think they did didn't they do like Zoom sketches for a couple weeks after that?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember feeling when I watched that, it made me feel really uneasy. I was like, it made me feel glad. I was like, I'm so glad they did it, but it was this weird view. I felt like, I was like, is this like a weird view into the future? Like I think maybe just the fear of everything that was happening. And then you're seeing like this show and you're seeing it in this format now. I think like for me, it took like, I think it just almost made the fear a little bit worse, probably inadvertently. Like I don't think that was clearly not the intention, but to me I remember just feeling that way when I was watching this, like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like what
dude. Yeah, like I know for me during that, it's like when you seen like shit like that happening on Zoom, and then like there was no sports at all, and like, everything that you had grown accustomed to is like fuck. Like I think it was the fear, like how long is this? Like, it was me being selfish, but it's like, fuck, how long am I going to be without sports? Like, is this how I'm going to watch Saturday Night Live now? Is like them doing fucking sketches on Zoom? It's a terrifying time.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you, you were the podcast that you mentioned, do they speak about their time on SNL kind of favorably in good light? Or?
Yeah. I mean, no one like says like, "Oh, I had a horrible time." Yeah, it's all they speak very fondly of it. Geez, I'm trying to think who all they've had. They've had Lorne Michaels has been on the show, which
I like. I'm going to find and listen to that. I'd like to listen to that.
I'll send you the link as soon as we're done here. But everybody that comes on the show, they have a Lorne story, and they all do the Lorne voice, and I can totally see where Mike Myers got the inspiration for Dr. Evil from.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, Mike Myers has actually been on the show, which I found a little shocking at first until I found out that him and Dana had reconciled and they're on good terms again. Because I knew for a while there they would right each other's throats for some weird reason. Um, yeah, they did like a 2-part tribute to Chris Farley. John Hamm has been on there. Paul Rudd was the guest, I believe, this week
Okay.
since he's been the host so much. Chevy's been on there. I don't think they've gotten Aykroyd or like Murphy or anybody like that, but yeah, I mean it's usually Conan O'Brien, who used to be a writer on the show. He's been on there, so yeah, it's somebody that's been involved with the show, and they just talk about their experiences and stuff on there. It's a really, really good podcast, and plus, this may be a little foreshadowing, but I really missed seeing Dana Carvey in anything, so being able to hear him again was kind of cool. Honestly, I'm not a big Spade guy, but yeah, Carvey's awesome. So I was like, okay, I'll at least check this out. And it's on regular rotation now.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'm glad you told me about that. I think it's one of those things I see and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I just haven't watched it, but I'm definitely going to now. I wanted to ask that. I listened to Jay Moore's audiobook
Mm-hmm.
for airtime. And the way he talks about it just awful time, right? Um, well, lots of awful times, sure, awful and good times. And then listening to people like Janine Garofalo talk about her time on the show, and just interviews I've seen, and but more just so most of the insight that I've kind of learned about from Jay Moore, and man, that's a cutthroat place, and it is like it is not, at least at the time, the way he describes it, which is surprising. It is not a collaborative place at all. It's very cliquey and it's very competitive. And it's like, I remember reading that and just being complete, because my thought of it is, oh man, I bet these guys are just have the best time doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And maybe they do now. It seems like I feel like the culture of Saturday Night Live has changed, especially now. It is not the same show it was, excuse me, when I first started watching it, for sure. But yeah, it is just the way he describes it. It's almost like it can be very harmful to your health the way he describes it.
From what it sounds like it's kind of like I mean, it's kind of like anything there's only an hour and not even an hour and a half, really. Once you break down the two musical performances, commercials, things like that, it's probably like an hour, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's like an hour a week where you're trying to get shown on TV. And I mean, I could see it being cutthroat. It's like they're all trying to vie for that same spot. And like some people just don't cut the mustard. And it's like with anything, though. Like if you don't have success, you're not going to view it from a favorable lens. Sure. I completely forgot that Janine Garofalo was even on that show till you said something. Yeah. And I don't remember seeing Jay Moore in a lot.
So Sarah Silverman has talked about her time on the show. Man, you're right. I think it's because I'm sure if you asked, Kenan Thompson, he's got to say nothing but great things about it.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think it all depends on how your time was on the show, kind of what you're going to say. But yeah, it was really interesting to hear him talk about it, because it was just the complete opposite of the way I thought it would have worked. Something like that. But it's one of those things. Now, once I learned that, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then it's like, oh, it's that. I always heard, learn Hollywood is cutthroat, but I've always had this fantasy that no, it's just people who love making movies working together.
Yeah.
And how that works, I'm like, oh, it kind of made me understand how Hollywood probably works too, right?
It's with anything in society. It's just if you've got a group of people in the same field, company, office, whatever, and there's limited spots for avenues to success, you're eventually going to start trampling over people to get a piece of that,
Yeah.
And I mean, Yeah, the Fly on the Wall show, it's usually like everybody speaks very highly, although you do hear some of the stuff, especially when you talk to people that wrote on the show, how stressful their week is trying to write stuff, because it's usually they're locked pretty much in an office Tuesday, and they're basically pulling a lot of late nights and stuff trying to get stuff done, and where they can't come up with anything, and then all of a sudden it just happens, and then everything's fine. But
Yeah. Yeah, learning about that made me realize I've always had like this fantasy. It's like, man, I feel like in another life, I would love being a comedic writer or being on that show. And then learning that made me realize, like, oh, you have to have strong character to do that. Like that, you have to be a strong person to withstand that and then keep doing it.
Week after week, because I'm sure that those guys submit stuff, and like the performers, like, I'm not doing this. This is fucking shit.
Yeah. Or, I've heard stories like Chevy Chase, the way he talks to cast members. I hear he's not a very kind person.
No, well, him and I know one of the things was him and Bill Murray did not get along.
Oh,
I think it was Murray and Chase had a fist fight right before they went live.
Oof.
And then, and then of
Couple-
course they turn around and they do Caddyshack about a couple of years later, and they have that infamous scene together. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's just, and to me, it seems like I could definitely see it, because especially with like the '90s cast, because Sandler eventually has Spade and Rock, and it seemed like those guys were always in stuff together, like Sandler, Farley, Chris Rock, Spade. All those guys seem to do shit together, so I can kind of see that clique mentality with that stuff.
Yeah, like it was just that. Yeah, I imagine like Jay Moore says he's excited to be on the show, and it's just like he feels like he just gets the wind sucked out of his sails for no reason, and he says it just feels like that, especially with a lot of new cast members. It's just like, oh, you come in really excited, and it's just like you're so excited to like work with these people, and then you realize like these people don't like you, right? Because you're competition to them. Like, they want somebody new coming in and taking airtime away from you. So it's understandable, but yeah, I can imagine. I was just like, yeah, you have to love it so much, and you have to just be okay with day after day getting shit on.
Well, that too, and you've got, when you're coming in there as a new person, you've got people that are already established in there that, like, it's kind of like those are Lauren's go-tos. Like, he can depend on Sandler, he can depend on Will Ferrell, and then, like, you've got somebody new coming in, like, can you cut it? Yeah. And, like, a lot of times, I know, as an example, Spade had been on that show for years before he finally broke out. Mm-hmm. He was always that guy, like, when they had, like, I remember I was showing, I was watching the Lunch Lady bit with Sandler and Farley. And you start seeing, like, all these bit players that you don't really, like, Norm Macdonald was, like, dressed up as something, and Ellen Cleghorn was dressed up as something, and who else was? I think Julia Sweeney was one. It's like, these are like bit people that like never really, they were good, but they never really stood out outside of norm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember and I can't remember the name of the show, but MTV used to have a show where they would do it's kind of like a short 30-minute documentary on a celebrity, and there was no speaking. It was usually just text over music and pictures. And they did David Spade, and he I think he said a big part of his adopting kind of his very sarcastic, snarky, mean-spirited comedy came out of just this realization that if he doesn't come up with something at Saturday Night Live, he's going to get cut. Mm-hmm. And he did like that, started doing that Spade in America thing where
the Hollywood Minute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think Spade in America or something. Oh, that was a show he had maybe. Yeah, Hollywood Minute, where he made jokes. I remember he made that joke about Eddie Murphy. It was really kind of mean-spirited, Oh
yeah, he hit below the belt on a lot of shit.
But but I think that was part of his coming up with a way to be more memorable on the show, and that with other things worked.
Yeah. Well, I know it's been a while since you've been on the show, but we've kind of changed things up a little bit. We have a little bit of a conversation around topic, and then we craft a top 5 list off the topic. So today, I decided we were supposed to have producer Adam on the show. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it, so he did provide his list. But I wanted to get your thoughts on who you think are the top 5 best performers to come out of Saturday Night Live, and give us your favorite skit from that person. So
Okay.
I'll do 5, then you do 5, so on and so forth. And then, we'll just do that. Then I'll read Adam's list off once we're done. So who would be your top 5? Who's your number 5?
So number 5, I would say just Chris Farley is probably my number 5.
Mm-hmm.
I have him on the list. He was a amazing performer on that show, and then his motivational speakers, Matt Foley bits, are just something that is seared into my brain forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I also chose him. He's on my list just because I think, again, very formative years when he was on that show, and I just have a lot of great memories of my life. And again, that you'd mentioned earlier, these people kind of like forge the kind of comedy you like. And so I feel like Farley, just his outrageousness and very physical, is something that I loved, and I love that type of comedy, and I think that's because of seeing that, through him.
I know, like, one of the things I liked about Farley was I was watching in preparation for this, I've been pretty much on YouTube all week watching like Saturday Night Live skits, stuff that I remember that I really liked, and I watched the Hurley Boy skit where it's him and Sandler. Sandler's trying to get you to let him watch your house, and Farley used to do this thing where, and he's done it in some movies. I think he did it he did it in Billy Madison when he was the bus driver. But he gets like upset and he just kind of keeps mouthing, like he's silent, but he's just like kind of muttering under his breath, like swearing almost. And
I know what
I had never seen that before in anything, and until I seen him do that, and it just, to this day, like I find myself doing that sometimes. Just I get mad and I just like mutter like son of a bitch, mother, start swearing under my breath.
Cool thing that we saw in one of the tours we did going through Saturday Night Live studio is there's on the stage in one of the walkways, it's a really low bar, so they have a thing that says "Watch your head," and then I can't remember who they said wrote it, but Chris Farley kept hitting his head on that, so one of the cast members wrote Farley right after that. And it's just a cool little piece of history.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Producer Adam had Bill Hader as his number 5.
Oh, okay.
And his favorite skit was the character Vinny Verducci.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's interviewing Malkovich, and of course it's a porno movie that Vinny's been in.
I love that because that's one of the genius of that skit is he can do impersonations of the people on his show, and not in character. And when he does John Malkovich, I don't know if that's what you said, but he does. Yeah, the John Malkovich, and it's a dead-on impression, and it worked so well for the sketch because he's playing this non-English-speaking character, and he sounded more like John Malkovich than John Malkovich did.
Yeah, I caught and he just kind of, it's like almost seamlessly he just goes from one to the other without no flubbing or anything. There's actually a skit where he is on Weekend Update as John Malkovich. He has the bald head. He looks more like that character, like the way his head's shaped and the bald head. He looks like that one character from the video game Tekken.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like the spiked bald head character, but it's still hilarious. My number 5 is I cheated a little bit. I have a 2-way tie between Dana Carvey and Mike Myers.
Okay.
I always liked Carvey because I I'm a sucker for people that do impressions. You'll probably find on my list that quite a bit of those are super awesome impressionists. But Carvey was always like so good at doing that. And plus, I always find that he was also able to blend in seamlessly into scenes and be like kind of a background character and let other people shine, but still like contribute when he needed to.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
And then Mike Myers, I think during that 90s run, he crafted so many memorable characters from that show. Linda Rickman, who's the, it's drawing a blank, fucking it was Sprockets, Dieter.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, Wayne from Wayne's World. So,
yeah,
just so many memorable characters from him. And then my favorite skit from them is obviously my favorite Saturday Night Live movie of all time is Wayne's World. So I'm obviously going to choose Wayne's World. Picking a particular one, it's probably the one with Hanks as the roadie for Aerosmith. And even for this podcast, for like the first 6 months of this show, I used to test the mics with that same cadence that Hanks used in that testing 1 2 sibilance 1 2.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I saw the sequel before I saw the first one.
Really?
And I don't know why that happened. I wanted to see the first one. I never got a chance to see it. I think I saw I want to say you and I saw the sequel at a drive-in because I have a memory of that.
Well, I don't know. It wouldn't have been a drive-in because Wayne's World 2 came out in right before Christmas.
Okay, then never mind.
You may have seen it with me, but yeah, I don't think it was a drive-in.
But yeah, I can't remember why I saw the second one first, but I remember seeing the second one first, and then I had to go back and watch the first one. And yeah, I don't know. It's just weird how that worked out.
That's how I took in The Godfather. I watched 2 before 1. So, hey, it happens, man. They're both awesome. Adam had for his number 4, he had Kenan Thompson, which I thought was a little bit surprising, although I love Kenan, and his favorite sketch was the Black Jeopardy, the one with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Yeah.
That one is fucking amazing. I think I seen that for the first time like 6 or 7 months ago.
Yeah. That's a great sketch. I want to make sure this is the one where he's got the
Make America Great hat on.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and after he gets the first right answer, he goes, well, we're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it. That's it. Yeah. He goes, I love those Medea movies. If I can laugh and pray at the same time, I got my money's worth.
That's 90 minutes well spent.
Yeah, that's it. And everybody goes, yeah, man.
I was during watching a lot of these skits, I watched the screen test skits that they used to do all the time. They would take like a famous movie and they would do like they did the Star Wars screen test, which is my all-time favorite one. But they seem to have brought him back in the early 2000s. But Kenan always did Sinbad. And
I remember.
I honestly, this is no slight to people like Sinbad, but I think his Sinbad is funnier than Sinbad. Yeah. Kenan's great though, and I think he's closing in on the record for being the longest tenured cast member, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he passed Daryl Hallman. Yeah, he passed Daryl, and man, I want to say I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over as producer of that show. I think that's kind of what he wants to do. At least I remember like reading something about that.
Now, did Daryl Hammond, is he like taking over for Don Pardo now? Because I know he did it for a while. I don't know if he's still doing it or not.
At least that's as far as I saw online. I think he's
really
he's an announcer. Yeah,
I always liked Hammond too. Kind of an underrated performer.
Yeah, you're right. He is. He's another one who is great kind of background, but then is an amazing performer himself. Yeah.
Who is your number 4?
So my number 4 is Will Ferrell.
Okay.
Yeah, Will Ferrell is. When I think about Will Ferrell, honestly, he's just. I feel like he was made for that show.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember feeling that way about that watching him. I was like, he is like the perfect cast member. And I just felt like that. And he could play anything, and he was always really funny. And I've learned that a lot of that he came up with a lot of his own, the sketch ideas that you see came from him. And one of the coolest things is I remember seeing his audition online. And one of his bits that he made up for his audition is actually one of my favorite skits of his. And I don't know why. I just think I think it like reminds me of my dad and my uncle, but it's a man yelling at kids to get off the shed. I don't know if you remember that skit, but
Yeah.
he's just flipping burgers and talking, and he goes, get off the damn shed. But he does that in his that's one of the bits he does in his audition. And it's funny, you can hear people laughing at the table.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah, he's such a powerhouse performer though. Like he really, even when he's not the main character, he's kind of like he's the person you kind of gravitate towards when you're watching these. Him and Farley had a lot of that. I mean, their comedy styles obviously completely different, but they seem to kind of have that same energy where it seemed no matter if they're supposed to be a background character or whether they're the featured performer, like you couldn't take your eyes off of them.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is the skit he did with Jim Carrey. The lifeguard, the hot tub lifeguard.
Was it the jacuzzi lifeguard, wasn't it?
Yeah, jacuzzi lifeguard.
Yeah,
jacuzzi lifeguard. Where Jim Carrey but I feel like Will Ferrell is the kind of victim, I guess, in that, but he still, I feel like, was very great in that scene with Jim.
What's your favorite skit from Will Ferrell?
So I was the shed one.
Really?
He's done so many, but the shed ones. Some of the other favorite. I've always loved the. I can't remember what it's called, but it's he and Anna Gasteyer, where they were the. Singers.
I forget Anna's name, but he was Marty Culp, the band.
Yeah,
band couple. Yeah.
And so that I love those, and then the one he did with Sherry O'Terry, the
cheerleaders.
The leaders were I always thought those were hilarious. But yeah, I would say the sketch that when I think of Will Ferrell to get off the damn shed. I guess maybe because I think it reminds me of my dad. I feel like that's how he would have yelled at my brother and I if we were like climbing on the house.
And me and my brother and.
Yeah, you're right.
I know for me, number 4 is I had Bill Hader. I mean, we kind of went over it. So good at impressions. He's kind of like a utility guy that like you could put him in anything, and he was always really good at it.
Yeah.
I think favorite skit for me, I almost wanted to go with the Vincent Price, James Mason skit, the Halloween special, but I never knew he did this impression until 2 weeks ago. But if anyone out there watches Dateline NBC, they have a reporter on there named Keith Morrison. And Bill Hader does an impression of him that, like, Friday, I was having a kind of a shit day at work, at least starting out my morning, and I was listening to a podcast, and I said, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to throw on some Hader stuff on YouTube. And I was watching at least 4 sketches where he does Keith Morrison, and it's exaggerated, but if you ever watch Dateline, you know that like he's got the cadence and even like some of the shit that Keith says on Dateline down to an absolute T. So
like
probably
he's almost excited about what's happening. Like he's excited. Like he's excited about what he's hearing. That's funny. Because of that sketch, when my wife is just something I do, she's like trying to tell me something as she goes. I go,
I was there was one where he was talking to Kenan Thompson. I forget the lady's name. They were a married couple, and it was basically one of those things where they had a wedding and like at the reception, fucking anything that could go wrong went wrong. And the lady says, yeah, like we got married, or Kenan says like, yeah, we got married. He goes, so you liked it, so you put a ring on it. And then they're talking about the shit that happens, and then she says, everybody's dancing, and then all of a sudden, like the floor of the reception hall just collapses, and all these people fall down. He goes, was that supposed to happen? And Keith Morrison does stuff like that. I mean, like kind of not to that extent, but yeah, it cracks me up so much. So yeah, Bill Hader's my number 4 though. The guy does no wrong. Plus, I didn't realize this until he did an interview on that Fly on the Wall show. I guess before Saturday Night Live went on, he suffered from severe anxiety to where he was getting like physically ill before the show went on. And
oh wow,
yeah,
that's when I hear that, I'm like, what the fuck, man? Because like I can't picture that at all. Like,
yeah,
I'm just
especially someone like him.
Perfect. You're perfect. You know, it's so funny. Like it's just where everyone's human. You know, it's crazy. Like even a person who like performs that way, feels that way. That's incredible.
Yeah. Adam, is number 3. He has Dana Carvey.
Okay.
And he has the chopping broccoli skit. I honestly, I know the song, but I don't remember the skit too well, so I can't really comment on it too much. But Carvey's awesome. I think we kind of went into him. I went and talked about how I felt about Carvey earlier, but yeah, can't go wrong with Carvey.
I can't remember. Is the premise of that song like? Is it kind of like making fun of, like, and maybe I'm mistaking this. It's like making fun of like people, like musicians who think they're like so amazing when they like do a key change or something. Or
I think so. But yeah,
like,
I never.
The song isn't about that, but that's the point of it. It's like I remember because he does something. It's like they when they do a key change, it's like. Everyone, it's like he makes this big face at the audience, you know.
Yeah, well, that's the cool thing about like doing like these kind of episodes when I'm asking you guys what your favorite stuff is you guys have been able to throw me curveballs. Like I'm going into these thinking like, okay, they're going to say this, and it's something completely different. Like if with Carvey as an example, I would expect something like, his George Bush or Perot or even the pepper sketch or something like that. And it's just, some of these answers have been like some very refreshing to hear. So yeah. Who'd you have at number 3?
My number 3 is Bill Hader. Bill Hader is my 3. And I think I love you. All the reasons that you love him, the same thing. I think he's just a great performer, and he's another one who I felt like is perfect for that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like
perfect for that show.
He really feels like if you went into a lab, like, okay, give me the perfect Saturday Night Live performer that could do everything. It's like, okay, you're going to come out with Bill Hader.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. A great performer. I would say, I was going to say my favorite sketch was Vinny Vedecci, but since that was already mentioned, I'll say probably my second one is I don't think he did the sketch when he was on the show. It's when he came back and hosted, but he was in a puppeteering class, and do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's just like he's the one who's like a war vet, and his puppet looks exactly like him. And
I just watched that one this morning.
Yeah.
And he starts making out like he's talking like basically he's suffering from PTSD from the war. His puppet is.
Oh yeah, that cracks me up, man. That one, and I also love that too because he's making his cast members break, just because of how ridiculous it is.
During the screen test ones though, talking about how good he is in impressions, like his Alan Alda.
Oh yeah,
who I had completely like forgotten about. Like he was obviously a very prominent actor during the 70s with MASH, and but then he comes back, like he seems like he's almost like kind of prominent again, at least a little bit. And he always like, this is great stuff.
Yeah, it's that was a fit. Yeah, it was a dead on impression.
My number 3 is I had Phil Hartman.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. He's just a consummate professional. It's just like you could plug him in wherever, and you knew you're getting something good. He also, to me, Phil always seemed like he was not just a good comedic performer, but he was actually a really good actor.
Yeah.
And some stuff that I liked about him is even when he's playing the straight man, like he makes I always use the Matt Foley sketch to describe him. I don't think the Foley sketch works quite as well if Phil Hartman is not playing like everybody's dad in that, just so straight. Because I've even found myself when I was revisiting that sketch a couple days ago when he yells down to the basement, goes, "Hey Matt, come on up, buddy." I find myself calling people buddy sometimes. I'm like, fuck, it's totally ripped off from that sketch. But I mean, Phil Hartman was just like the guy that you can always count on. He was always going to deliver, and they just the pros pro. They called him the Glue. I think that was the nickname he got on the show. And it seems like ever since he left, they seem to have that one performer that has been on the show for a while that seems to be, you can plug him into anything. We spoke about Daryl Hammond earlier. It seems like Hammond took the mantle from Hartman, and then once Hammond left, Keenan kind of took the mantle from Hammond a little bit. Favorite Hartman sketch. I love the caveman lawyer was really good. That's good. I like the what was that? The Frankenstein, Tonto, and who was the other one? Because Hartman was Frankenstein, Lovitz was Tonto, and I forget the other one. But I liked his Bill Clinton, specifically the one where he's out jogging and they stop inside the McDonald's, and people are asking him about the. During Clinton's early years as president, there was a conflict with Somalia where countries were sending aid to Somalia, but the warlords that were running the country were taking it, so the people that needed it weren't getting this stuff. So people inside of McDonald's were asking him, why aren't these people getting stuff? So he's basically eating bits of their food and explaining the whole, this Egg McMuffin, rice and water. Snatch, just takes a giant bite out of it, gives it back to him, intercepted by warlords. And that, to me, I think even though I think Hammond's impression was a little better, Phil Hartman's always going to be if anybody does Clinton, he's the standard for it.
Yeah, that's no, I agree with that. Yeah, one of my I'm pretty sure it was Phil Hartman, and because in my memory it seems like it's him, and it seems like it's a role he would play. It was a very visual gag, but he would play like detectives a lot, right? Because he had that great voice for that. But it was a sketch where the gag was, he would come over, he goes, "Hey, what's going on?" And he would look at the victim got shot. He would look under the thing, and then they had a mechanism in their sleeve, so when they covered their mouth, this fake vomit would fly out. And so it was a really visual gag, but that visual gag of the vomiting mixed with his, just the way he talks, his voice, is very funny.
His Sinatra too was also killer.
Oh yeah.
Joe Piscopo was doing Sinatra back in the mid '80s with Eddie Murphy when he was on the show, but then Phil Hartman's took it to a whole nother level. I'm trying to look up that skit, Tarzan, Tonto, and Frankenstein. It was Nealon, Hartman, and Lovitz. That was it. Those were really good too.
Have you had a chance to watch his audition tape or his audition video? If you have, it's on YouTube.
Phil Hartman?
Phil Hartman's.
I'll have to take a look at it tonight.
It's great. And I've watched it a few times just because I think it's funny. Some of the bits he does is really funny. But my favorite thing about it is he just has this I don't give a shit attitude in this. And I feel like, man, I don't know if that's an act or if that's just how he is, but it's really cool. Yeah. Just the way, because you see some and people are really nervous. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And he just, he almost has this attitude like he doesn't care. And it just makes him seem so cool during his audition.
Phil Hartman gets bonus points for me too, because he's in two of my favorite comedy shows of all time, Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons. So,
yeah. I was at home. I remember the breaking news when he got shot. I still remember that. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's so heartbreaking to see that. And I don't know, it's one of those things where he's probably one of the last celebrities that you would expect that to happen to.
Yeah.
So, so we're at number So you've given your number 3.
Yep, I
gave my number 3. Adam's given his number 3. Number 2, Adam also has Phil Hartman as his number 2.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't really need to go too much into Phil Hartman, but his favorite sketch from Phil Hartman was the colon blow cereal ad.
Cereal, yeah. How many? Yeah, how many bowls? That I forgot all about that. Yeah, how many bowls would you need to match one bowl of colon blow?
I remember as a teenager, my mom was trying to put a grocery list together, and she's like, "You guys want a cereal?" And I had mentioned, like, "Yeah, just grab some colon blow," and it just went completely over her head. Like, I've never heard of that one, but okay. And then, like, you see the grocery list, you see, like, we need, like, laundry detergent, milk, bread, cereal, and then, like, in parentheses, colon blow for Russ.
Colon blow question mark? You should have said, "Well, you have to ask for it." It's in the back.
Yeah, they keep it in the back. Who was your number 2?
My number 2 is Tina Fey.
Oh, dude, she was so close to being in my my top 5, but go ahead.
Yeah, she. I think another one. She's just phenomenal writer. Right.
Yeah.
One. I mean, she just did everything on that show. Great. She was great on camera, and she was amazing. She was an amazing writer. And some of the things I've heard about her from other cast members and interviews is she's the nicest person, and really helped new cast members, would bring them in the sketches. So I think that's just beautiful person, right? My favorite sketch, and just on camera, she was always just so funny. Her Sarah Palin sounded better than Sarah Palin.
The fact that she looks a lot like her too sold it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was great. And I would say probably my favorite sketch, and this is probably one of my top favorite sketches of all time, just because I just think it's genius, is her Colonel Angus sketch with oh my gosh, his name, Christopher Walken. Yeah. Colonel, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
And I remember watching that, and it took me a while to realize that it was just the play on words of cunnilingus, right? I didn't get it at first, because she goes, I've been waiting so long for cunnilingus, and you just say it over and over again. Eventually, the audience picks up on it.
Yeah,
and I think that's when I picked up on it too. And it is just that sketch. I just think that is an ingenious sketch. I just think it's so funny. Anyway, yeah. So that's favorite sketch from her, and probably again one of my top favorite sketches of all time, just because I just think it's genius. I think it's an amazing sketch.
I think Tina Fey is important too, because it seems like she was kind of during her period is when I think, in terms of one of the things I felt after the original cast, because the original cast had Lorraine Newman, Curtin, and Gilda, who are just powerhouse comedic actresses. But after them, Saturday Night Live really kind of lacked a strong female performer for a long time. Yeah. And then, like, when she came on, it seemed like the female performers actually seemed to be stronger than the male performers that they had. It seemed like she was like kind of like the head, led the charge of, like, when she was on the show, we had Amy Poehler, we had Maya Rudolph. My timeline's a little foggy, but I think Kristen Wiig kind of intersected with some of them too.
She came in a little bit later, yeah.
And then I think maybe Kate McKinnon did too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, now it's
right. That's a great observation, because I didn't even think about that, Russ. I mean, now I feel like they have several phenomenal female cast members who, like, they're great on their own, right? Not just as great bit pieces, but they have great memorable characters of their own. And you're right. I think before Tina Fey, I can't really think of Molly Shannon maybe is the only one I can.
Yeah, they had Molly Shannon, Gas Dyer, and Sherry O'Terry. They were solid. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't think I would because I honestly, Kristen Wiig, Poehler, and Faye could easily be on any of our top 5 lists, and I think nobody would really have a strong argument against it. You know?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Or even Maya Rudolph, who I'm more of a Maya fan. I think she's kind of the strongest of those 4. But yeah, it seems like ever since Faye was on that show, they've always had like at least one really strong female performer. Like, because you went from her, and then Wig took over, and then McKinnon, and now I know Cecily Strong has kind of been pretty solid. I do like her a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't watch it enough right now to, make a strong case for who the female lead is now. But yeah, it seemed like she was kind of like the renaissance for like reinvigorating the female cast.
Yeah, that's a good observation. You're absolutely right.
I have one in the bag every great once in a while. Number 2 for me is Farrell. We kind of already went over him, and I figured that we were going to interlap some of these. Favorite sketch, it's pretty easy to go with the Gene Frinkle More Cowbell. That's probably his most iconic one. But for me, my favorite sketch of his, it's a tie between his Robert Goulet, where he does the Goulet, the rap stuff. That was actually my voicemail message for years, was him rapping Big Papa by Notorious B.I.G. as Robert Goulet. And it's a tie between that and then the Neil Diamond Storytellers.
Oh, yeah.
Which to this day, I can't hear a Neil Diamond song without hearing I killed a drifter to get an erection.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's fantastic, though. I actually, looking at it now, Saturday Night Live has spawned a lot of like comedic stars they go from Saturday Night Live to the movies and become big stars. And I don't know, like, who would you think, before we get into our number ones, biggest star to come out of Saturday Night Live movie wise? I think it would have to be Farrell, Eddie Murphy, and probably Mike Myers would be your 3. Even though Myers only had Wayne's World and the Austin Powers stuff, those were still huge box office hits.
Yeah.
And Sandler. Right. I can't forget about Adam Sandler, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But only just because of his quantity. No, I'm kidding. I love his movies.
Once you get to a certain point, then after that, it's like, eh.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah.
I think it would have to be him or Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. If you mean box office, or
it just as a huge star.
Yeah. I've Eddie Murphy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak. I would say Murphy, just basically going off what I've read, but I know for me, my list doesn't include a lot of the older performers, just because I'm going off of watching them perform in the moment versus afterward. Because I mean, like I've seen Eddie Murphy's stuff and it's fantastic, but like it kind of, and even like Chevy and John Belushi and I don't know if any of us have Belushi on our list, but I can't put into context the cultural significance of them during their time, so I didn't have them on my list. But Murphy, though.
That's kind of why I didn't have like him on my list, right? Because I've felt like at most of my I've only ever seen a few sketches of his, that I can see online. So, and they're the memorable ones like Buckwheat and Gumby and stuff. But yeah, I agree. I just didn't have that's more of like me discovering that afterwards.
Yeah, it's like going back and like, okay, like I've watched, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so I'm going to go back and reintroduce myself to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's like, okay, yeah, like those were much better. That's probably a bad way to describe that, but speaking of that though, Adam's number 1 is Dan Aykroyd.
Oh, okay.
I can't.
Your sketch.
His favorite sketch was the Weekend Update where he refers to Jane Curtin as an ignorant slut.
Oh.
I do like a lot of Aykroyd stuff. Actually, me and some buddies used to go to Boston Market, which I don't even know if those are still a thing.
They are.
Oh, are they?
No, I don't think they are, man. I'm gonna look that up now that you say that.
Well, last time I was at one is me and my wife and my son went on vacation to Florida, and we have a thing that if we go out of state and if they have a professional sports team, we try to go see that just to say we've seen, the Detroit Red Wings or we've seen the Denver Broncos, whatever. But we were on our way to a Tampa Bay Rays game, and on our way to Tropicana Field, we passed a Boston Market, and we were looking for some place to eat. And I said, "Oh fuck, there's Boston Market. We got to go." And my son was like, "Well, what do they have there?" He's like, "Oh, they got like rotisserie chicken." And he's like, "I don't want to eat that." And I'm like, "I don't care."
Yeah.
I was like, "We'll stop at McDonald's and get you a Happy Meal on the way, but I'm eating at Boston Market because I don't know if I'll ever see this again."
Oh man, I haven't had Boston. We used to have one at Fairfield, right, or somewhere around there.
Yeah, we used to frequent the Boston Market quite a bit in our area. But they
I'm talking about.
They used to ask you for a name for your order, and Dan Aykroyd used to do this skit on Saturday Night Live. It was called Fred Garvin, Male Prostitute.
Yeah.
And that was like, it would be one of the names I'd use for Boston Market. Yeah. It's like they'd call your name like Fred Garvin, order for Fred Garvin.
I think I've heard you use that before. I feel like you've used that in other places, but too.
Yeah, Aykroyd had a lot of good stuff though. He did the Bassomatic. I remember he took over. It seems like they always have they haven't so much in recent years, but they always seem to have like one of their big stars do the presidential impression, and he was Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And I remember the skit where Jimmy Carter was doing I think it was like a live call-in show, and the caller was tripping on acid, and he was basically talking the guy down like, "Listen, you're on planet Earth, you're fine. You have some music, or like play some music. Do you have any Allman Brothers?"
Yeah.
And Jimmy Carter sounded nothing like Jimmy Carter, but it was really good. Then, of course, the Wild and Crazy Guys with Steve Martin.
Yeah, Steve Martin, yeah.
Yeah, Aykroyd's a good choice, man. Like, I really wanted to put one of the old guys because Aykroyd, Belushi, and Murray were like my three favorites from like that first run of Saturday Night Live. I loved everything they do. As a matter of fact, I still use the Bill Murray lounge singer Star Wars. Whenever we're talking Star Wars, I have to throw it in as obnoxiously as I possibly can.
We have a duty to.
Yeah. I think it's written like, okay, cue up the obnoxious lounge singer bit. Yeah, Aykroyd's a good one though.
Yeah.
Who do you have as your number one?
So this was this was a little hard because there was a few that I wanted to choose, but I think ultimately, if I had to think about who's my favorite cast member of all time, someone, and this is someone who I always go, like, I love watching their sketches, like I YouTube their sketches often, and it's Jason Sudeikis. I loved him.
Whoa!
I love him. So yeah, again, it was hard. I had a few, but I would say ultimately Jason Sudeikis is probably my all-time favorite SNL cast member.
Okay, yeah. Any particular just any reason why?
I think reasons for that is I have several favorite skits, but reasons for that is I think he was a great. I think we've talked about this a few times with several people. He is great, at kind of being the focus of the skit. And then he's great just being in the skit in the background. I think a good example of that is in Kenan Thompson's he's the What's Up With That skit. He's just the kind of b-boy break dancer in the background for that, and he cracks me up in that every time because when Kenan starts singing, you see him jump from his spot in the spot in camera, and the way he does it, I freaking love it. I think it's so funny. But yeah, even I think one of my favorite sketches from him, and I watched it this morning. I probably watch it at least a couple times a month because I'll think about it and watch it. And a weird, obscure skit, but it's his Main Justice. He did a couple of them. Have you seen these
Uh-uh.
Main Justice skits? So the premise of it is it's where he goes, it talks about it's like a court television show called Main Justice that takes place in Maine. But then when they introduce the characters, they're all like they're Cajun characters. And so Jason Sudeikis does an amazing case, like, now what's all this now going on here now, right? And he talks like that the whole time. And but the premise of the show is it's weird because they're in Maine, but they all talk like this. And so everyone in the courtroom, including he is the presiding judge, and then usually it's the judge, and then the two skits it's been the host is the bailiff. So they're kind of the main focus, and then everyone in the courtroom, the defendant, they're all very Cajun, and then it's like the plaintiff is Cajun, and then the defendant is like just a regular person who's very confused about what's going on. And it's so funny. He goes, "What's happening here? We're in Maine, you know." And he goes, Jason Sudeikis, he was like in the skit, he goes, "Well, I don't know, maybe after Katrina, a lot of us got relocated here to Maine. We just don't want to change, you know." And then it's anyway. I highly recommend you look them up.
As soon as we get done with this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to look them up.
And so the way he talks, like I talk to my kids like that all the time, especially if they're just getting on my nerves and like they just ask some questions. I just start talking like that to them, and then they get tired of it really quickly.
Yeah,
because they can't understand what I'm saying. So it's just they ask, Dad, can I use the iPad? What's out there? You want to use the iPad there now? Would you want to watch the show now, huh? Is that what you want to do there now, huh? Can I use the iPad there? Well, you got to tell your dad what you want to use your iPad there now, huh? It's almost like, who's the guy from The Water Boy?
Yeah.
Right? He talks like that. It's like a version of that.
Colin with where you maggot.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, you got to watch it. And then Jamie Foxx is the host in one, and then Justin Timberlake's in another one, and they're both hilarious skits. So yeah, Jason Sudeikis, my number one.
Oh, see, I knew this. Now I feel kind of like my number one's going to be like a big letdown because you guys have come up with like these kind of out of left field choices that are really good. But for me, number one is Chris Farley.
Yeah.
For me, my criteria for my favorite performer is if I can put him on and the skit is just as funny seeing it for the 100th time as it was the first time. Farley probably has more of those in for me than any other performer that's come through the show. I know you mentioned the Matt Foley motivational speaker, and that probably would have been mine. But just simply to be different, I'm going to go with his other iconic skit is the Chippendales with Patrick Swayze.
Yeah. Patrick Swayze, yeah.
And that works just so well because it's simply like the polar opposite of what you'd expect a Chippendales dancer to be. You've got Patrick Swayze, who's shredded, good looking, movie star, and you've got Chris Farley, who's built more like me. And the fact that these judges are struggling to pick who they want to win.
That's a really good one. I'm sorry, I wasn't saying to he's built just like you. I was saying to that's a great choice. I wanted to be clear.
Okay. I don't think I'm quite Chris Farley's size, but Farley for me though, he's just a ball of just manic energy, and just even like some of the skits, like he's like this big ball of energy. But from everything I've read and heard people describe Chris Farley, is the Chris Farley show performances is more in line with who Chris Farley really is as a person. And those skits work so well together too, because I have a feeling that if this show ever gets big enough to where I can interview famous people, I would imagine for like the first, depends on who I'm talking to, but I'm sure that I would probably interview famous people like that too. Like, hey, remember when that rock was chasing you after you grabbed that gold monkey and you got in that plane and flew with that? Remember that? That was so cool. That would be me. And I think everybody was would have kind of that starstruck moment like that too.
Yeah, I agree, man. I was gonna say, if those probably my behind the motivational speaker skits is my favorite because I think they're hilarious. You
Yeah,
know, he's Paul McCartney. You guys remember in that song you said, "The love you make sequel to the love you take," or something like that. He
yeah,
goes, "Remember that?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I do." He goes,
yeah. He did
"Damn it."
the ones with him, and then he did one with Scorsese that was fantastic too. So he's like, remember, like they were talking about the passion, or not the Passion of Christ, the Last Temptation of Christ, and yeah, that one was really good. But yeah, Farley's my number one. Man, I love those choices for number one from you guys. Those are like completely out of left field, and I love them. And it's like those are people you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
Two quick questions before we go. Did anyone like barely miss the cut for your top five? Because I have quite a
Yeah,
few, but
I had a lot. I was gonna say Andy Samberg just because his as a cast member performer, right? He wasn't very strong, but his strength was in the skits and writing those and things like that. And I've always there was a time in my young adult life where my favorite part of Saturday Night Live was to see what the digital short was going to be. Like that was usually I would just watch, and that was really what I was watching to see what the digital short would be. So I think just the cultural significance of that for me, I wanted to say Andy Samberg is one. A couple, and then right behind them, it's two people. It's Kyle Mooney and crap, I can't remember. It's another cast member. They came on at the same time, and they actually came on together. They were doing online skits together on a website, and so I think that's how they were found to audition. So both of them, I would say, I think behind both great performers. So they were both almost on my list. How about you, man? Did you?
Actually, my top five originally started out as a top 20. And I was whittling them down. Eddie Murphy was on there, Belushi, Aykroyd, Bill Murray from the older guys. Didn't have really anybody in the mid-'90s, but then Kate McKinnon, who I absolutely adore. She is hysterical. I think she's probably, for me, is probably the best performer they've had in like the last 5 or 6 years.
I agree with that.
Tina Fey was on there. Amy Poehler was on there at one point. So, yeah. It was tough whittling that down to five.
Yeah, it was. It was. And here's the thing: if you ask me this a year from now, this might be different a little bit. I would definitely have Hader, Jason Sudeikis, but again, depending on like my mood, I feel like there's a lot of people that, like Andy Samberg, it was really hard for me to not put him on there, So, but yeah, no,
yeah, like Farrell, Farley, and Hader would probably be on there for sure. Actually, my 4 of my 5 were pretty much set in stone, but it's that fifth spot, like trying to figure out who I wanted to put in that fifth spot. And that's why I kind of cheated a little bit. I was like, I'll just put fucking Myers and Carvey on there together. Last question before we wrap this up. Who is your favorite all-time host of the show?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Again, if you ask, I'm going to say this now because I watch these episodes a lot. Justin Timberlake is probably one of my favorite hosts. I've always loved when he's, the skits on there have been really funny.
He is surprisingly a very good host on that show.
Yeah, he really is. He's I remember his first appearance on there was surprisingly good. I was like, oh, well, he's really, which makes sense. He's a performer, right? So, but yeah, I was surprised. I was like, oh wow, he's funny. And then just especially his later appearances there, it's just really, really funny. You can tell he's comfortable. He almost seems like he's very seasoned. The last, I don't think he's been on there in a couple of years, but the last time. So I'd say, definitely Justin Timberlake is one, and there's probably several others. I can think of. Christopher Walken is one. He's a really good host.
I know for me, it's probably Baldwin.
Oh yeah.
When I was researching this show, he's been a host 17 times.
I didn't know it was that many.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And
One of my favorite opening monologues from him. This is in the '90s. He does the monologue and he goes, he loves Host Society Live. You get the whole New York experience. He goes, come on, let's go show you guys. And he's tipping everyone. Do you remember that? He's like, he goes backstage to say, oh, this is, hey, it's Dana Carvey. Hey. And then he says, after he goes, he puts a couple bucks in his pocket and then he goes on to the next one, for the whole New York experience. It's a great opening monologue.
Obviously, he's probably going to be best known for his stuff as Trump during the elections of 16 and 20. But I always loved his Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
Like he did that skit with the Tony Bennett show. I love the one where he had Liza Minnelli and her husband was at David Guest.
Yeah.
And I know for me, we didn't get to talk about, because we could probably talk about this for another 4 hours, but one of my favorite sketches was always the Joe Pesci show. When it was, what was his name? Jim Brewer. He was he was Joe Pesci, and they always seem to have a rotating spot for De Niro. And I always thought that Baldwin's De Niro was the best because it looked like late 80s, mid 90s, like later De Niro, where he's done Heat and Casino and all that stuff. Kind of the slimier version of him.
Didn't the real Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci?
Mm-hmm. I think that's how. I think it was. I want to say it's Jim Brewer's last season on the show. I think that's how they ended the skit. Was the real Pesci and De Niro came and beat him up.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I forget who was De Niro on that one. I don't think it was Baldwin. Colin Quinn used to be, when they didn't have like the guest host. Colin Quinn would usually be De Niro, and he always just did the kind of the squinty eyed kind of like that laugh that De Niro always. Yeah, that frowning laugh that De Niro always did.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a good go.
Hey, man, it was awesome talking to you about Saturday Night Live, man. I've been wanting to do this for a while, ever since I heard the show, and I thought, it'd be perfect to have you on. Plus, it's been a while. I know you were awesome on the Ocean show, so I wanted to have you back, so I thought this would be perfect.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, man, I feel like I'd love to do another one, man.
We'll have you back on. Yeah, for sure. I think these conversations, and then we create a list after that. These are awesome. And I know you and I had spent many a day working behind the counter at a video store, just mowing down cigarettes like they were going out of style, would have discussions on tons of shit. So,
oh man, yeah. Good old days, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, awesome talking to you. And before we wrap this up, guys, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Check out the description of the show to find those links. You can email us if you have any questions, concerns, complaints. We direct those towards producer Adam. So be sure to follow us. We drop new episodes each and every week. So listen where you get podcasts, and we will talk to you guys later.